In the vast, desolate wilderness, the Israelites found themselves in a state of dire complaint and unrest. Just a short while ago, they had witnessed the miraculous parting of the Red Sea, the triumph over Pharaoh's army, and the divine provision of water from a rock. Yet, as they trudged through the barren sands, their faith began to waver, and their memories of Egypt's perceived abundance took over their thoughts. The once celebrated liberation from slavery now seemed like a cruel jest, and the people were on the brink of rebellion. The Israelites, who had been delivered from the harsh conditions of Egyptian bondage, were now faced with a new set of challenges. The wilderness was a harsh and unforgiving place, and the constant need for food and water began to take its toll. The manna, a mysterious and miraculous food that appeared each morning, was their only source of sustenance. However, the monotony of their diet and the memory of the varied and rich cuisine they had enjoyed in Egypt led to a collective nostalgia that bordered on delusion. The riffraff, a group of foreigners who had joined the Israelites in their exodus, were particularly vocal in their complaints. They yearned for the fish, cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic that they had eaten in Egypt. Their nostalgia was contagious, and soon the Israelites as a whole were weeping and demanding meat. The phrase, "Who will feed us meat?" echoed through the camp, a stark contrast to the gratitude and faith they had shown just days earlier. Moses, the leader of the Israelites, was deeply troubled by the people's discontent. He had been chosen by God to lead them out of Egypt and into the Promised Land, but the burden of leadership was becoming increasingly heavy. The people's constant whining and lack of faith were not only disheartening, but also spiritually exhausting. In a moment of desperation, Moses appealed to God, questioning why he had been chosen for such a difficult task. He even went so far as to ask God to end his life, believing that death would be a preferable alternative to the constant struggle. God, in his wisdom, responded to Moses' plea by instructing him to gather 70 elders to share the burden of leadership. These elders, who were known for their wisdom and integrity, were to be endowed with a portion of the divine spirit that Moses possessed. This act of delegation was a significant moment in the history of the Israelites, as it marked the beginning of a more collaborative leadership structure. The elders were to help Moses manage the people and provide guidance during this challenging journey. However, the solution to the people's immediate problem, their craving for meat, was both miraculous and punitive. God promised to provide the Israelites with an abundance of quail, a type of bird that would rain down from the sky. The quail would be so plentiful that it would cover the ground for miles around the camp, and the people would have more than enough to eat. But this generous provision came with a warning. The people's craving for meat was a sign of their ingratitude and lack of faith, and if they continued to complain, they would suffer the consequences. Sure enough, when the quail arrived, the people feasted to their heart's content. They gathered the birds in vast quantities, storing them for future use. However, even as they indulged in their newfound abundance, God's wrath was kindled. The moment the meat was still between their teeth, before it could even be chewed, a plague struck the camp. The people who had been so insistent on their craving for meat were struck down, and the place where this tragedy occurred was named Kibroth Hatava, which means graves of craving. The story of the quail and the subsequent plague serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of ingratitude and the importance of faith. The Israelites had been delivered from slavery and provided for by a loving God. Yet they chose to focus on what they lacked rather than what they had. Their rebellion and discontent not only brought about suffering for themselves, but also tested the patience and grace of their divine deliverer. In the end, the episode of the quail and the manna teaches us that true contentment and gratitude come from recognizing the blessings we have, rather than fixating on what we lack. The Israelites' journey through the wilderness was a test of their faith and a lesson in trust. It was a reminder that the path to the promised land is not always easy, but with faith and a willingness to follow God's guidance, it is a journey worth undertaking. In the vast, desolate wilderness, the Israelites learned a harsh but necessary lesson: that true freedom and abundance are found not in the tangible things of this world, but in the unseen presence of a loving and faithful God.